Okay. Hi, I'm Hyowon, and I'm very excited to be a part of this workshop today. Perhaps unlike other speakers, I study humans and especially how infants and young children learn in social contexts. So as many of you today might be looking towards cognitive science for inspirations for building more powerful, flexible, socially intelligent, embodied AI, I hope that some of the work that we're doing and the way we think about how humans learn and help others learn can lead to new ideas and directions for research. So first, let's take a look at how humans learn. So many of you may have seen this video, and most likely you saw this as an example of a curious human learner who actively explores the world and generating new data, learning how the world works. However, what's not captured in this field of view are his caregivers and family members who are probably just nearby, who created the safe environment with a lot of things to explore. And as humans, from the moment we're born, we're surrounded by other people. And we're incredibly curious, not just about the world and about objects, but also about other people and their actions, what they're thinking. We're also taught from people and by people who want to help us learn. And as humans, we also have created all kinds of environments to promote learning from others, from daycares to schools and even conferences and workshops. So these are just many examples, just some of the examples of the ways in which we learn from others and help others learn. So perhaps learning actually looks much more like this. Let's take a look.
What is? What is it? This is a blicket. What's a blicket? See that? All right, I'm going to give you a bunch of blickets to play with while I write something down, okay?
So she just saw a blicket that sticks to the block shown by this adult, and then we're given a bunch of other blocks to play with.
It's still not sticking. How do these stick? Just let me know when you're done playing. Oh, they're not sticking. That's weird. I think there's no stickiness anymore. Come on. These are not working. Maybe I can do something. Just let me know when you're done playing, okay? You can. Ethan wants to help me build a tower.
So what did you see? She observes others' actions and she imitates what others do, but she's not just blindly copying. She was imitating the adult's action because she generalized what she saw and expected other blocks to stick too. And when the first one didn't, she went ahead and explored all these other blocks too, trying to explain what's happening and communicating her thoughts to the adult as well. And at some point, she even generates a new goal of building a block tower with the help of her brother. So all of this is happening in parallel in less than a minute. So think about what this means for a child to be doing this for a lifetime. So the guiding question for our research program in the lab is what makes human learning so powerful, distinctive, and smart? And of course, this is a question with many potential answers, but the one that I want to focus on today is the fact that we learn from others and help others learn. And in the context of this workshop today, I also want to ask how we can use insights from human learning in order to build better embodied AI. However, unfortunately, the way we typically think about social learning tends to be rather limited. We tend to think that social learning means to copy or imitate expert demonstrations or follow others' advice, which sounds very different from individual learning. So we tend to think that individual learning and social learning are two different things, rely on different mechanisms. We also think social learning is different from teaching. Teaching is what teachers do, and learning is what learners do. They rely on separate kinds of processes. So what this means for this particular community is that despite a lot of progress in implementing social learning, we still have machines that are trying to learn from others without understanding why. Why did the person do what they did, and why is it useful to learn from others? And therefore, these machines can't decide when to learn from others, what to learn from others, or whom to learn from. So what I would like to argue is that this way of thinking about social learning vastly underestimates its power. And what I'd like to do today is to try to paint a different picture of how we learn from others and help others learn, and present examples of studies that support and extend this picture, and try to lay out challenges for building intelligent machines that learn from, interact with, and help humans. So in the past couple of decades, there's been exciting progress in formalizing human learning as probabilistic inference from observed evidence over abstract structured representations. And the idea is that humans have rich priors and draw powerful inferences from even small amounts of data that comes from learners' observations and exploration. And consistent with this, developmental psychology has also found evidence that infants, like this one over here, engages in exploratory play, test hypotheses, and learn from self-generated evidence. And so, for instance, this learner might come across a toy, play with it, and discover how the toy works. But as I emphasized earlier, children are rarely alone, and often they observe other people interacting with the world. So the idea behind inferential social learning is that humans learn by drawing inferences, not just from evidence they observe on their own, but also from evidence generated by other people. So does this mean that individual learning and social learning are basically the same things? Well, yes, because it draws on the same inferential machinery, but also there's important differences, because when people generate evidence, they do so for a number of different reasons in a number of different ways. So actions can be incidental or accidental without any clear goal, or instrumental with a self-serving goal. So the person might simply want to play with the toy. However, in some cases, and often in what children observe, is instructional or pedagogical actions with a clear communicative goal. For instance, actions done with the intent to teach the learner how this toy works. So by considering how the information was generated, by whom and how and why, learners can draw different inferences even from seemingly the same data. And such learning can be especially powerful when the evidence comes from teachers who are trying to select the best set of evidence to help the learner learn. So in my picture of social learning, learners are not just imitating or passively trusting what was given. They're trying to interpret the data by considering how the data were generated. And communicators, they might act with different reasons and different ways. Often, what they do is to act as helpful teachers who are selecting the data by considering how the data would affect the learner. That is, how they might help the learner achieve their goals, revise their beliefs, or increase the learner's utilities. So what does this mean? Both learners and teachers are trying to achieve their goals of learning and teaching through a generative model of how the other party thinks and plans and acts. So how does this lead to more powerful, effective learning? We can think of at least 3 different ways. First, learners can draw flexible inferences based on how the evidence was generated. Second, learners can evaluate teachers based on whether they generated helpful evidence, whether other people generated helpful evidence. And third, learners can become teachers. If they understand what it means to generate helpful evidence, they ought to be able to do the same for others to help others learn. So let's first take a look at the first hypothesis. So imagine a box that looks like this, with many blue toys, just a few yellow toys. I might reach inside the box, draw this blue toy, squeeze the toy, which makes a funny squeak sound. I do it again, I do it again. And the question for the learner is whether the yellow toy squeaks too. So I didn't do anything with the yellow toy, so what would you learn from these 3 blue toys? Well, in this case, there's nothing special about the fact that I took 3 blue toys out of the box. The sample is quite probable, given the composition of the population, which might suggest random sampling. Perhaps I might selectively sample them, but it's not clear. So if you were a baby, well, the yellow toy comes from the same box. They kind of look the same. So there's no reason to not try squeezing a few times to see if it squeaks. However, if the same sample came from this kind of box, the sample is very improbable, which suggests strong or biased sampling. And why would I sample just these 3 blue toys out of a box that's mostly yellow? Presumably because only the blue toys squeak and the yellow toys don't. So if the baby understands this, they might not try the squeezing the yellow toy as many times. They might just try to do other kinds of things. So what we have shown across a number of conditions is that infants draw different inferences depending on the probability of the sample given the population, and they try to squeeze the toy on average, different numbers of times, depending on whether they expected the yellow toy to squeak. And what this shows is evidence for a graded inference about the property of the yellow toy depending on the probability of the sample. And these responses are well predicted by a simple Bayesian model that infers the property of the yellow toy based on the sample and priors over different sampling hypotheses. So what this means is that even babies can draw different inferences from seemingly the same kinds of data from just seeing a few blue toys. And in older children, how they manifest is through different ways of exploring even the same toy, given the same kind of demonstrations. For instance, if a teacher demonstrates one function of a toy by pulling this tube out from this toy, the toy makes a squeak sound. But if it's a teacher who knows all about the toy demonstrating how the toy works, what the children infer is that this is the only way that the toy works. And when they're given a chance to play with the toy, they mostly play with this part of the toy. Compared to children who saw pretty much the same evidence, but by somebody who's never seen the toy before, and she accidentally discovers how this toy works. And in this case, what children do is they not only play with this demonstrated part, but also they explore the toy broadly because they have no reason to think that the toy doesn't do anything else. And in what children did in the left pedagogical condition is that when teacher shows just one function, they understood that it likely means there's no other functions, because if the teacher knew that there were other functions, she would have shown them as well. Now, let's think about the teacher who showed how the toy works and taught you just one function. And imagine you were the child who actually found out the toy can actually do many different things. How would you feel? So in principle, the teacher didn't do anything wrong. She showed something true and interesting about the toy, but she clearly wasn't providing you the best set of evidence that she could have because she omitted a bunch of other things. So the second hypothesis is that in these cases, learners should be able to evaluate teachers based on whether they generated the most helpful evidence or whether they provided under-informative pedagogy. So what we have shown across a number of studies is that children understand when a teacher was under-informative and rate a teacher as less helpful when the teacher shows only one thing out of a toy that does multiple things, compared to a teacher who showed the same thing but on a toy that doesn't do anything else. And they understand that if the teacher omits something, not because she knew and didn't show, but because she didn't know and therefore couldn't show, they tend to exonerate such kind of omission. And they also can evaluate teachers who are overly informative by repeating redundant information or providing more than what the learner needs. Now, the third hypothesis is that children ought to be able to provide information that is maximally helpful for the learner too. So in this study, what we were trying to show is that whether children can prioritize teaching what maximizes the learner's utility. Can they choose what to teach based on how their teaching affects the learner's utility? So an example is, imagine you are stranded on an island and after days and weeks of trying really hard, you finally learned how to make fire. But then if you encounter somebody else who also doesn't know how to make fire, but also stranded on the same island, you really would want to show this person how to make fire because you understand that this person would struggle without your teaching. So what we have shown with Sophie Bridgers, a former student of mine, and Julia Hara-Ettinger at Yale, is to try to show this experimentally by showing them a pair of toys and asking them which one should be taught. So imagine this toy that has one button. It's really easy to figure out or discover how it works. And if you press this button, the toy plays music. This is what we call the low reward, low cost toy because it's low cost to discover. And the reward is interesting, but not as rewarding as this high reward, high cost toy. So this toy is incredibly difficult to discover without being taught because the way it works is that you have to press this button and this button at exactly the same time. But when you do, it does generate a pretty rewarding function that children really like. So children played with both toys. They learned how they work. They were able to demonstrate back to us. And then the experimenter asked them a key question. So the experimenter says, I have a friend who's going to play with these toys all by herself later. Which toy should I teach my friend? So this is a decision for them to teach one toy and let the learner explore the other one. So what teaching does is to ensure that the learner can activate the top toy and reap the reward without having to pay the discovery costs. So you can think of this choice of what to teach as choosing one of two teaching plans that has a higher utility for the learner. So if you consider the top toy here, if you teach this one, then the learner would learn this toy, but would really struggle with the bottom toy because it's really hard to discover without being taught. So in this case, it's beneficial to teach the bottom toy such that the learner would surely activate the toy, reap the reward, while minimizing the costs for activating the toy and without having to discover it on their own. And the learner will have to explore the top toy, but this one's pretty easy to discover on their own, so they would also reap that reward as well. And doing it the other way around, teaching the top toy would not be a wise choice. And what we have done is to ask the same question with not just with this pair of toys, but with a number of different pairs of toys. For instance, matching the reward and varying the costs, and matching the cost and varying the rewards, but also using this toy to be compared against other toys that differ in their relative costs. So what the model predicts by considering all of these variables shown here is a choice that looks like this. And what we have shown in different groups of children is that their choices look very close to what the models predict. And we have shown that other models that don't include all of these variables don't provide as good of a fit to human behavior. So what this suggests is that children are already thinking about what would be rewarding and what would be costly for other people to learn and learn from exploration and learn from their teaching. They're not just choosing what's rewarding, and they're not just choosing what is hard or cool or difficult. And they're thinking about the expected utility for other learners to decide what to teach. And even when it's clear to teach, there's decisions about how much evidence is necessary for the learner. So for instance, if there's a toy that has 20 buttons and only 3 buttons work and the rest of the 17 buttons don't do anything, if you are this child who has to teach a learner about how this toy works, would you press just 3 of the buttons or all 20? Well, the decision depends on what the learner knows. So if the learner already expects a few buttons to work because the learner's already seen the similar toys before, you can do away with just showing 3 buttons that work and it would be fine. But if the learner has never seen toys like this before, showing just 3 would be misleading because the learner might think that, well, everything might work the same way. So it's incredibly important to show every single button, even the inert buttons, even though they might be costly to demonstrate all 20. And that's exactly what 5-year-old children do. They press different numbers of buttons to teach the same toy, depending on what the learner understands and knows and expects. So what we have shown overall is that children consider what the learner wants and knows and provide the right kind of information and the right amount of information for the learner. So what I have shown you so far is that learning from others means much more than imitation or passive trust. Learners are interpreting the meaning of evidence based on who did what and why. In teaching is much more than providing what's accurate or novel or rewarding or cool. As teachers, children are already considering what the learners know and want and maximize their utilities. And what this means is this is possible because humans can engage in these interactions as learners and as teachers through a model of how people think, plan, and act. And what this suggests is a role of theory of mind in a broad sense, that is reasoning about others' goals, desires, and beliefs, as well as their expected utilities. So now it might be natural to think, well, implementing these kinds of thinking about others through a model of others is really hard and intractable. And why would machines really need to think about others' minds anyways? But what I would like to try to do in the rest of my talk is to try to provide specific examples where this kind of learning can really augment the scope of what children can learn and what they do. First, this kind of learning allows you to use emotion, even emotion, as information. So what does this mean? We're familiar with the role of prediction error in learning, and of course, even infants tend to explore more when they see surprising events. But learning from prediction error requires the learners to know enough to generate a prediction in the first place. But what if learners can capitalize on other people's surprise, for instance? When somebody has access to parts of the world that's hidden and looks surprised, we might immediately wonder, hey, what's over there? And infer that there's something unexpected happening. But in order to do so, the learners must have a causal model of what makes people surprised. So in this study, what we were asking is whether infants can infer hidden states of the world by using others' surprise as vicarious prediction error. This is work with Young Woo, a postdoc who's actually starting next year at U of Toronto, Scarborough. And so take a look at this person who has a box full of mostly red balls and just a few white balls. She randomly draws one and puts it inside a small black box. So what do you think is inside the little box? You would think that presumably the red one rather than the white one, and you would understand that the white one would be quite unexpected. And this is exactly what infants understand as well. They look longer at this unexpected outcome of white ball compared to the red ball. And what we have done is to replicate this finding first, and then we did a series of other experiments with a small tweak. So let's take a look.
I got one. And I put it in here. Okay, I'm going to take a look first. Look what I got.
So now what do you think is inside the box? So by using this person's surprise as information, what you can do is to revise your expectation about what is inside the black box. Now, the unexpected outcome becomes the expected outcome, and expected outcome becomes the unexpected outcome. So what we were trying to do is to see whether we can reverse the pattern of infants' looking time by using emotion, by providing this surprise expression. What we have shown is that's exactly the case. So infants look longer at the expected outcome because they think it's unexpected given the surprise compared to the white ball. However, they revert to the original pattern when the person isn't surprised and she just looks smiling at the outcome here. So in this case, they look longer at the originally unexpected outcome. And what we have done is to try to replicate this finding across a number of experiments. So theories of social learning often focus on learning from actions or learning from language. And also in machine learning and robotics, there's been progress in imitation learning, often from expert demonstrations or learning from human speech. But once you think about social learning as inference from others' behaviors, pretty much any aspect of behavior can be information when you understand how these behaviors are generated. So what if we had machines that can learn from all kinds of social signals, including emotions? This kind of ability would be particularly useful for embodied agents that must assist humans in complex environments, especially if they can take expressions, not just indicators of feelings, but also as information about the world and their internal mental states. So there's a lot of progress in formalizing such reasoning as inference problem, working backwards from emotion expressions or speech or actions to infer the actor's mental states or hidden states of the world. And I look forward to more efforts that bridge AI with progress in cognitive science in this direction. Second, reputation matters. And you might think, well, AI doesn't need reputation. What do we need it for? But perhaps you'll change your mind after seeing this example here. So in this study, children were presented with two toys, and there was this experimenter who says, we're going to play with these toys, and Sarah, a naive observer, she's going to watch us play. So Sarah's sitting here in this room as children are playing with the experimenter with these toys. So let's take a look.
Yo, isn't that cool? Those lights are really cool. You try. 1, 2, 3, go. Let me see this one. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, go.
So the child is failing while Sarah's watching.
For this toy, you have to push this and this at the exact same time. Okay, I have to go now. I'll see you later.
And now Sarah leaves the room.
This one, you try. 1, 2, 3, go.
And then the child finally succeeds. And then afterwards, the child played with the green toy, again failing twice and succeeding the third time, but Sarah was outside of the room the whole time. So what Sarah observed is the child failing twice and without seeing the child's final success on the red toy. Now, the child has a chance to show Sarah one of the two toys, and by showing her the green toy, the child can show Sarah something new that she's never learned because Sarah doesn't know how this green toy works. However, if a child understands and is capable of reasoning that, hey, Sarah thinks I can't make the red toy go, then they might want to show the red toy because in order to show that he can actually do it, even though Sarah has already seen the toy multiple times. So what do children do? Let's take a look.
Show our friend Sarah one of these toys. Which one would you like to show her? This one or this one?
This one.
The red one? Why do you want to show her the red one, Lucas?
Because I can do it.
Because you can do it?
So in a nutshell, what we have shown across a series of experiments is that children, of course, they prefer to teach someone about a new toy over something that they have seen already, especially when Sarah left the room after seeing the child's success. But just like in the video you saw, when Sarah leaves the room before the child succeeds, they're more likely to choose the red toy that Sarah saw them fail, just like what this child just did, so that they can communicate to Sarah that they can actually make the toy go. And this tendency is even stronger when Sarah already knows how the toys work, so that there's no competing motivation to show the green toy. There's been a lot of progress in developing agents that are motivated to learn, that is maximize information gain or minimize error. And many AI algorithms can perform better than humans in tasks with clear end states and reward structures. However, human behavior is also driven by a range of social motivations like competing or cooperating and even impressing other people. And so what if we had machines that can learn about the self, like how did I do, or care to change what other people think of them by showing, hey, I can do it. So even though reputation management may sound like a very human thing, they're powerful drivers of learning and self-evaluation and self-improvement. And this process, what we have done is to reconstrue this process as mental state inference and communication of information that corrects others' beliefs about the self. And there's models that have formalized a theory of mind in many ways, in ways that can make this kind of problem more tractable for implementing in machines. And perhaps machines can benefit by virtue of such motivations, especially embodied AI that directly interact with humans. Finally, for machines, failures are failures or errors, but for humans, failures mean much more than errors. So although I won't show you the details of exactly what we did in this study for the sake of time, what I have shown in my earlier study is that infants can infer the cause of their failures, and depending on whether they think it's the object that's failing them, they can't activate this toy because the toy might be broken, they try a different toy and explore. But when they think it's me, I did something wrong, and that's why I can't activate this toy, they readily seek help from other people, for instance, their parent. Similarly, when other people fail, they don't simply do what they did or try to do something. They do something that's meaningful by reasoning about why other people fail and thinking about what they can do in order to help. So when this person's failure suggests that she's working on a broken toy, then they give the experimenter the working toy by going across the room. However, when it suggests that she's working on the wrong side of the toy because she doesn't know how the toy works, they flip the toy over to show the correct button. So let's take a look at this child. There's two identical looking toys. One's working, the other's broken, and the parent has no clue. And the 20-month-old must use his prior knowledge in order to figure out what to do.
I'm going to try this toy. Can you help me play music?
Until the father fails, there's no way to tell which one's broken or working. But this child immediately figures it out and says, no music, and goes over to the other one to show the toy that works. So some of you may have seen this video of a toddler with a man whose hands are full of books. This child understands that when there's something blocking others' goals, you should remove the obstacle by opening up that cabinet door. But when there's somebody's ignorance is leading them awry, it can be much harder to figure out how to help because you have to pull your existing knowledge to problem solve on others' behalf. But what you just saw is that children can even do these kinds of helping behaviors when others' ignorance is making them fail. And even when they themselves fail, they just don't fuss out or give up. And especially when the failure indicates they're doing something wrong, they readily ask for others' help. So one of the most remarkable aspects of human intelligence is that we use our own failures and our own intelligence in order to diagnose what went wrong, and we try to figure out what to do, not just for ourselves, but also for others. So there's been a lot of progress in trying to make machines that are able to navigate the world and manipulate objects and make sense of sensory input. But what's still missing in embodied AI, I would say the ability to interact with other people. And this is especially important for building agents that can perform real-world tasks in real-world environments with real people. And as I said, humans have a model of others' minds. They see actions as more than targets of imitation or reward predictive cues, and they learn through inferences about contents of other minds. So can we build machines with minds that are equipped with a model of others' minds so that they can make sense of the social input, even from emotional expressions, reason about what others think, even about the self, knowing what to do next, even after failures for both self and others? And of course, the remaining question is what makes them motivated to do so? And as we have expressed in this short opinion paper with Natalia Velez, who's starting at Princeton in 2023, social learning through the lens of reinforcement learning has been rather limited. And beyond the scope of social learning, reinforcement learning generally provides a powerful framework for designing agents that are motivated to do things, but specifying the objective function is a non-trivial challenge. And humans, even though humans may have a general intrinsic motivation to learn and connect with others, there's a range of context-specific motivations that are often competing against one another. And humans are incredibly good at figuring out what they should do now or later over a long time horizon and balance different kinds of competing goals. So learning, at least in humans, doesn't look like this or even this. It looks more like this, and it occurs naturally in social context. And even in these contexts, it's important to remember that social learning is not about the behavior itself. It's about how others' behaviors can change the world so that the learner can do the same thing. And this requires an understanding of how other people think, plan, and act. And this provides the bedrock for powerful, flexible learning, communication, and cooperation. And these are precisely the kinds of things we want in the next generation of embodied AI that can truly understand and connect with and help other humans. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to the panel discussions and other talks in this workshop today. Thanks.